as a college boxer where it was characterized as wearing him out by absorbing punches with my face and then throwing the knockout punch. I never made it long enough to throw the knockout punch. And I think we're more likely to see that with Iran than not.
And back to you, Roxanne, I just want to put to you some comments that we had before this attack on Khark Island. Mohammad Bagher Kalibat, the Speaker of Iran's parliament, threatening that any attempt to take Iranian islands would make the Persian Gulf run with the blood of invaders. I mean, those are dramatic statements. Do you think that's what we're going to see literally in the Gulf?
Well, I think so far what we're seeing is that there's successfully stopping any kind of activity through the strait, and I think that at the moment is serving Iran's purposes clearly. As I think we've seen, there's over 110 tankers backed up, unable to get through the strait and out into the larger seas. I think this was a warning, likewise, by Ghalibaf, the Speaker of the Parliament, that contested islands such as the Tombs and Lesser and Greater Tombs and Abu Musa, which have been contested both by the UAE and by Iran as to who actually can claim them. I think it was a warning to them not to take advantage of this war in order to claim these islands in a use of force. And at one point, there was a mention of that from coming out of Abu Dhabi, and that has stopped. So I don't think either of those are as up to date as some of the other threats and attacks that we're seeing.
Roxanne, we heard David use the word restraint when describing the U.S. attack on the island. The Gulf has also been very restrained, given the number of attacks they've seen on their oil facilities. They've very much maintained a defense strategy when it comes to Iran. Do you expect that to continue?
Well, it depends on whether really the Gulf wants to get involved in the war. I think we're seeing neither Iraq nor the Gulf states wanting to get in the midst of a war that they do not see of their own making, and which is between the United States, Israel, and Iran. And although I think we can look at restraint in various different ways, the attacks that Iran is sustaining on its capital, for example, and on its monuments, it is not retaliating in a similar way. It's being extremely careful of what it does hit, and it is giving fair warning, as it did in the Fujairah situation, that it is encouraging those around the targets to leave because it does not want to hit civilian targets.
David, you don't seem to agree with what Roxanne is saying there.
No, I mean, what we're seeing is random fire at civilian targets. There have been some instances where Iran is acting the same way they accuse the Israelis of doing, saying, you know, this entire city needs to be evacuated. A military target has to be proportionate to the military value of it. And what we're seeing is, you know, when you hit the Fairmont Jumeirah in Dubai, that is a target of no military significance whatsoever. And it was probably targeted with an inaccurate weapon that they were just firing at a developed area and hoping to get something significant. So I really do have to reject that. There is a deliberate mosaic strategy which involves decentralizing command and authorizing low units to fire at targets that we've seen that really lack military logic.
David, we've talked in the past about how Iran is using low-cost drones to create much larger damage, if you like, in the Gulf. What are the Gulf's capabilities for defense going forward if we continue to see the sort of attacks we are seeing?
Well, I think the main problem here, and again, this stems from targeting civilian infrastructure rather than military infrastructure. So any kind of defense from the air is a point defense. So the question is, how many points are you going to defend? And then how do you defend them? If drones are coming into a densely populated urban area, like, say, the Crown Plaza Hotel in the center of Manama, then standard defense of firing bullets are of limited use because that bullet goes up, it goes down, and it goes down in a densely populated area. So I think that what we'll probably see is, first off, deterrence. and trying to destroy that, which is the most effective way of doing it. But then secondly, we've seen forces adapt, like here in Qatar, using attack helicopters, which are slower. They go closer to the speed of the drone. They fire a much more cost-effective missile, usually an anti-tank missile that costs $60,000 instead of $3 million for an air-to-air missile. But that requires constant vigilance, because to defend a large civilian structure is orders of magnitude different from defending a military structure, particularly when you're concerned about debris and stray rounds landing in inhabited areas.
And we saw that debris causing all that smoke and damage in the UAE just a little bit earlier today. Yeah. Okay, really good to talk to both of you. David DeRoche, professor at the Taya Marshall Institute, and Roxanne Fahmian, Middle East expert. Thank you. Well, you're watching Al Jazeera. Reminder of our top stories this hour. The US has struck Iran's Karg Island, the country's main oil export hub. President Donald Trump said only military targets were hit, but he warned oil facilities may be targeted if Iran continues to disrupt shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. A fire has broken out at Fujairah, a strategic oil transfer hub in the United Arab Emirates. UAE officials say it started after debris fell from an intercepted drone. Fujairah sits in the Gulf of Oman, bypasses the Strait of Hormuz, which has been effectively closed by Iran. The U.S. Embassy compound in Iraq's capital has been targeted in a suspected missile attack. The diplomatic facility is located in Baghdad's fortified Green Zone. Smoke was seen rising from the area and gunfire was heard around the site. It's the second attack in a week. Despite the daily Israeli airstrikes on southern Beirut around the airport, Lebanon's national airline is still flying. All others have cancelled flights. Middle East Airlines say it follows strict safety protocols, holding hours-long daily meetings to assess the risks of keeping Lebanon connected to the world during the fighting. Bernard Smith reports from Beirut.
All this area that is normally bombarded, we're not using this part of the runway. We are not parking any aircraft on this side.
As Israel pummels Hezbollah's stronghold in southern Lebanon all around the airport, the national airline has kept on flying, partly because of a tacit understanding with the Israelis.
And rest assured, if we are flying, if we are letting MEA fly, it means we are sure everything is under control. Just to give you an example, 3-4 days ago, we had a flight. They had a flight coming from Paris, and there were a lot of activities in the area. So they kept on holding. And in the end, they were about to divert to Larnaca. So they talked to the controller. The controller made a broadcast that we have a civilian aircraft coming to land on 6. Please clear the approach path. And they cleared the approach path. The aircraft landed, and then they continued bombing.
Welcome to Beirut. No other airlines are willing to take such risks, as an almost deserted airport demonstrates. Lebanese people see it as a point of pride that Middle East Airlines keeps flying.
We are loyal customers, always with Middle Eastern Airlines.
And you, sir, are you proud of Middle East Airlines?
I'm very proud. It's our airline. Everyone in the country is proud of their airline.
I'm sure they arrange something between them. No bomb will be, no problem with the Middle East. No security problem with the Middle East.
It's also prohibitively expensive for foreign airlines to get the insurance needed to fly here in times of conflict. But for Middle East Airlines, the state is essentially the insurer of last resort, providing financial guarantees that private companies won't. Israel hasn't always spared MEA. In 1968, Israeli forces blew up aircraft in their conflict with Palestinian fighters. It happened again in 1982. In this latest conflict, the airport has never closed. Everyone who wants to come home to Beirut has been able to. Bernard Smith, Al Jazeera, Beirut.
Israel has also been under attack. Iran launched a new wave of retaliatory strikes overnight. A number of attacks targeted central Israel, falling debris and shrapnel, damaged vehicles, buildings and facilities in several cities. Now, as Israel expands its attacks across Lebanon, there are now fears of an escalating ground invasion. Zainab Khoda has more from Beirut.
Israel is warning this is just the beginning. There's been hundreds of airstrikes in multiple locations. Nearly 1,000 people are killed. Civilians are not spared in what Israel calls its war against Hezbollah. Week 2, and the toll keeps climbing. 2,000 people have been wounded, more than 300 of them children.
When the missile came, it shook the building. It hit our neighbours. The glass, stones, and everything fell on us.
Doctors are concerned about dwindling resources with a mass influx of casualties while treating chronic and other conditions.
This war is very harsh. If we compare it to the 2024 war, we are receiving many civilians.
A ground invasion appears to be next. Israeli troops have been reinforcing their presence along the border and operating in villages inside Lebanese territory, preparing for what could be a major military operation involving creating a kilometers-deep buffer zone. They've begun targeting bridges as part of a military strategy to disrupt the movement of Hezbollah fighters and weapons who continue to fire rockets across the border and engage with advancing troops.
The Lebanese government, which misled and failed to fulfill its commitment to disarm Hezbollah, will pay increasing costs through damage to infrastructure and loss of territory until Hezbollah is disarmed.
International aid agencies are warning Lebanon is facing unpredictable challenges as conflict, mass displacement, and the lack of humanitarian resources converge. Nearly 1 million people have so far been displaced in the latest confrontation between Israel and Hezbollah. Prime Minister Nawaf Salam says that's 1 in 5 people in Lebanon. He's also warning that Lebanon is facing one of the most dangerous chapters in its modern history. The government and the army are under Israeli and U.S. pressure to confront Hezbollah. Doing so could lead to sectarian strife. Hezbollah is still defiant, warning Israel it is prepared for a long confrontation. But this is coming at a cost for a nation where many have still not recovered from the last war 2 years ago. For Mohammed Ta'i, he has already lost it all. 4 daughters, his mother, brother, brother-in-law, and nephew killed in one strike in southern Lebanon. Zena Khudr, Al Jazeera, Beirut.
Let's take a closer look at the importance of Kark Island, which Donald Trump says was heavily bombed by the U.S. military. It's a small island in the northern Gulf, about 25 kilometers off the Iranian mainland. The island is the main hub for oil exports, handling around 90 to 95% of Iran's crude shipments to global markets. Oil from inland fields is transported through pipelines to the island, where it's stored in large facilities before being loaded onto tankers. Kark has a major advantage. Deep waters close to shore allow large tankers to dock nearby. It also has its own airport to bring in workers and supplies. Let's speak to Hamid Reza Gholamzad. He's the director of the Diplo House, political think tank in Tehran. He joins us live from the Iranian capital. Thanks for your time. So, as we've been discussing on the program, Kark Island, hugely significant to Iran's oil economy. By the U.S. carrying out this strike on Iran's crown jewel, have the stakes of this war been raised?
The attacks that were carried out against Kark Island are not the extent that President Trump claims to be. First of all, they avoided attacking oil facilities because it is I'm not actually in favor of them. It would lead to more oil prices, more expensive oil prices, which is a damage to his own reputation, agenda, and policy. And he's already under a lot of pressure because of the rise in the oil prices. We can consider it to our understanding of his style and his characteristic that it might be a threat for the Iranian side, a message that I can damage this place. However, Iran is looking at the situation more pragmatically and practically. First of all, the damages and the bombardment that have been carried out earlier is not to the extent that he says. Actually, there are not that much facilities there to be attacked. There are not many military buildings and such things that he claims that we have destroyed everything, just a couple of buildings. is not that serious to Iranian side. So Iran knows what has been destroyed, and it is not that important. Also, Iran knows that it is not good for President Trump to attack the oil facilities, and it would actually damage the oil market.
Right. Okay.
Third,
so let me
Iran
ask
knows
you.
that if there is, and already said that if there is any attack against oil facilities, there would be an attack against oil facilities in the region as well.
Well, on that
so
point,
the
we've already
equation is
seen.
very
On that point,
clear from the Iranian side.
On that point,
They
we've
attacked
already seen
Iran
Iranian
attacked banks,
officials.
They attacked desalination plant. Iran attacked desalination plant. They attacked electricity facility. Likewise, Iran did attack electricity facility, and that is for the oil infrastructure as well. If there is any attack, there would be some attack from the Iranian side to the oil reserves or oil facilities in the region, and you know that what would happen to the oil market right now. Closure of the Strait of Hormuz has risen the oil prices from 72 to around 102 last night.
We're gonna leave that interview. Unfortunately, we seem to have lost connection to sound connection to our guest Hamid Reza Gholamzad. Many thanks to him, director of Diplo House, speaking to us there from Tehran. The war continues to rattle global financial markets. In the US, higher oil prices are raising concerns about inflation. Kristen Salumi reports from New York.
U.S. markets ended the day in negative territory under pressure from rising oil prices. The benchmark S&P 500 stock index closed down more than 0.5%, hitting its lowest level so far this year, while Brent crude oil is again topping $100 a barrel. That is double what it was a month ago. It's been a volatile week all around as investors react to the latest moves and expectations in the Middle East conflict. The longer it continues, they know the greater the impact will be on the economy overall. There's rising concern on Wall Street about the potential for stagflation. That's when inflation continues higher and growth is lower. And data released on Friday tends to show that growth has been slowing here in the United States. That concern has caused investors to downgrade their expectations that the Federal Reserve will reduce interest rates this year, and expectations that the markets will continue to slide as long as this conflict continues. Kristen Salumi, Al Jazeera, New York.
Japan imports nearly 90% of its energy, most of it from the Middle East. More than 2/3 of that imported energy is shipped through the Strait of Hormuz. Japan says it will release stockpiled crude and cap gasoline prices to stave off a disruption to oil supplies. Patrick Falk went to the port town of Misaki, where the fishing industry faces tough days ahead.
Misaki Port to the south of Tokyo is a hub for deep-sea fishing, popular among day trippers from the capital. It's nicknamed Tuna Town, and seafood restaurants specialize in serving the best cuts of the fish in Japan. Eating tuna is cheap here compared to in Tokyo, but rising fuel costs seem certain to make it pricier.
When it comes to things like tuna, the fishermen have to go out, and when fuel costs go up, it gets more expensive.
Even before the Iran crisis, seafood prices have surged over the past year, outpacing broader food inflation in Japan. Declining catches are partly to blame. Fishermen fear developments in the Middle East will add to the pressure.
If things don't change, we'll have to raise prices. Otherwise, we won't be able to continue.
Japan imports about 95% of its crude oil from the Middle East, leaving it highly exposed to the effective blockade in the Strait of Hormuz.
The government warns oil imports could drop significantly from late March. To manage potential shortages, it says domestic stockpiles will be released to refiners by as early as Monday.
But prolonged disruption could ripple through Japan's economy and squeeze industries that rely heavily on fuel. For fishermen, the tide is uncertain. Patrick Falk, Al Jazeera, Misaki, Japan.
The backlog of travelers unable to transit through the Middle East is growing. In Thailand, one of the world's most popular tourist destinations, over 400 flights have been affected, disrupting the holiday plans of tens of thousands of people. from Bangkok. Tony Cheng sent us this.
It was supposed to be a couple of months' escape from the bleak British winter for Sam and Mark. Instead, they're now worrying about how to get home. Their original flight through Doha has been cancelled, and they've no idea when a new seat will be available.
The frustration mainly is through the communication, and I would have thought since COVID they might have had a better contingency plan in place.
The beaches of Southeast Asia are a popular choice for tourists seeking to escape the cold weather. Few would have imagined that the war in Iran would impact their plans. But 20,000 flights have been cancelled globally in recent weeks, leaving more than 400,000 people stranded.
Hi everyone, update on Brits stuck in Thailand.
Many passengers, frustrated by the lack of information from airlines and governments, have turned to social media.
Right now there's a lot of misinformation circulating. The media are saying a small number of flights are leaving Doha and Abu Dhabi, but if you actually check the departure boards in the airport, transit flights remain cancelled.
The Thai government's offered financial assistance to some passengers, but stiff requirements mean few will qualify. Visas will be extended, they say, but information is scarce.
It's estimated that clearing the backlog of passengers who are currently stuck here could take as long as a month. But the bigger problem for Thailand is that as people start to make bookings for a perfect summer holiday on a paradise beach in Southeast Asia, they're not going to want to travel through the Middle East. Tony Cheng, Al Jazeera, Suvarnabhumi Airport, Bangkok.
Let's take a brief look at some of the other global stories making headlines. A sandstorm is sweeping across the Gaza Strip, where displaced Palestinians are living in tents and temporary shelters. Sand is seeping into the shelters, worsening living conditions. Health warnings have been issued, and the storm is expected to continue into Sunday. Hani Mahmoud has more from Gaza City.
Just to remind our viewers that the past 2 years, Palestinians spent their time battling crises on multiple fronts, from the bombardment, the devastation, the famine that is spread everywhere, to the harsh realities of displacement. And today they are battling with forces of nature. What we're looking at today is a very powerful sandy storm. In fact, I'm going to step out of the frame just to show you the extent of the storm that is starting to pick up. The wind is very strong, but it's adding another layer of hardship for Palestinians already struggling with the consequences of months of war and displacement. These, as I said, is picking up. The winds are strong, and they're carrying thick clouds of dust, making our vision here quite difficult. But it's moving across the cities, displacement camps, reducing visibility already, and forcing many of the people. We look at an area here that used to be quite busy and lots of traffic, but it's traffic is very little now compared to the past days, and forcing people to remain inside their tents. And when we talk about tents here across Gaza for the past 2 years, we definitely referring to makeshift tents, fragile structures, the areas, temporary shelters that Palestinians have used for the past 2 years and already worn out. And already the storm is sending sand and dust into these shelters, making daily life very difficult, especially for children. We think of the little ones, we think of elderly, we think of those with medical complications. For example, respiratory conditions are already reported inside the hospital. So at this moment, what we're looking at is just life is becoming more difficult, and the storm is not just uncomfortable, but it's a reminder of how fragile the living conditions remains across the Gaza Strip.
Nigeria is facing a hunger crisis. Attacks by armed gangs have displaced many farmers, and droughts have severely reduced food production. A weak currency and international aid cuts are making the situation worse. The government is distributing food parcels, but analysts warn it's not a long-term solution. Ahmed reports now from Abuja.
At markets like this, smaller purchases are evidence of the difficulties Nigerians face every day. Many food items remain out of reach for families.
If you want to eat 3 times in a day, you may not have a save. A save is at the end of the month. So we just try to manage ourselves with the little that we are having.
Traders say they aren't to blame.
High transportation and other costs are responsible for higher food prices.
Analysts warn the agriculture industry is in crisis. Attacks by criminal gangs have forced thousands of farmers off their land, and the cost of seeds and equipment are beyond the reach of those who remain. At the same time, prolonged drought and extreme heat are leading to smaller harvests and herds of livestock, reducing food supplies even further.
Recently, we have noticed that farmers are now reluctant to go back to the farm to grow, especially in this dry season, simply because the dry season agriculture is more expensive.
Aid agencies warn about 35 million Nigerians, mostly in the north, face severe food shortages. Humanitarian aid cuts have worsened the situation. In Africa's most populous country, the consequences of inflated food prices stretch far beyond empty plates. When families or households spend nearly everything they earn just to eat, school fees, rent, and healthcare quickly become unaffordable. Although official data shows food inflation has fallen to single digits for the first time in 14 years, the relief is barely evident. Because Nigeria imports much of its food and equipment needed to grow it, a devalued local currency has pushed up prices while reducing people's purchasing power. Across the country, families are coping the only way they can: smaller portions, skipping meals, and turning to cheaper, often less nutritious food. The government is stepping in, distributing staples such as rice and maize.
The only option for us is to ensure that our people, especially vulnerable and less privileged, have something to take for their needs of day-to-day needs of their lives.
But analysts say although such intervention helps, it's not sustainable. Ahmed Idris, Al Jazeera, Abuja, Nigeria.
Cuba's President Miguel Diaz-Canel says his government has held talks with the U.S. to discuss Washington's blockade on his country. The U.S. has cut off oil supplies from Venezuela and Mexico, decimating the Cuban economy and triggering a humanitarian crisis. No fuel has entered the island in 3 months. Ed Augustin is in the Cuban capital and takes a look at the impact of the U.S. blockade.
I'm on an electric tricycle in downtown Havana, and as you can see behind me, the streets are almost dead. There's hardly any vehicles, public transport has almost been completely cut. And so electric scooters and electric tricycles like this have fast become one of the only ways to travel around in Cuba. And that's because the Trump administration right now is imposing what amounts to an oil blockade on the island of Cuba. At the beginning of January, U.S. Special Forces abducted Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. Since then, not a drop of Venezuelan crude has touched these island shores. That left Mexico, one of the last, in fact, the last major oil supplier to Cuba. But Mexico buckled in late January after the Trump administration threatened tariffs on any country delivering Cuba fuel. On Friday morning, Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel addressed the nation about the island's critical fuel situation.
The blame lies with the energy blockade that has been imposed on us. How many countries are there which could survive an energy blockade for 3 months and manage to maintain the levels of electricity generation that we have maintained?
On Thursday, the Cuban government put an end to weeks of speculation about whether or not there are negotiations between the Cuban government and the Trump administration. It recognized that talks between the two governments are indeed underway. And there was also a prisoner release. 51 prisoners are soon to be released, the Cuban government says, and they say that that prisoner release was done in consultation with the Vatican. Now, the Catholic Church's role here is intriguing, because 12 years ago, when the diplomatic relations between the US and Cuba were re-established during the Obama administration and the Raul Castro administration, during that time, the Catholic Church was at the heart of it. They were playing a role of guarantor of those negotiations. So, what do we know? That negotiations are underway. What do we not know? What they're talking about, and whether or not an agreement, a deal, so to speak, might be struck. Ed Augustin, Havana, Al Jazeera.
OK, that's it from me, Malin Saeed. The news continues here on Al Jazeera after a short break. Do stay with us.
As the war on Iran escalates, Al Jazeera's correspondents are on the ground.
This is the first time that President Trump has spoken publicly live.
We projected 4 to 5 weeks.
insisting that the United States has plenty of weapons left.
We have only just begun.
Still, he's not ruling out sending U.S. troops into Iran.
We expect to take additional losses.
Today, we grieve for the 4 heroic American service members who have been killed in action.
That is a price Americans say they do not want repeated.
Stay with Al Jazeera for the latest developments.
We saw this exact same pattern happen in Gaza, the same lazy, flattened reporting that we saw in Gaza when it comes to the war on Iran.
The Listening Post decodes the media on Al Jazeera.
Examining the impact of today's headlines.
The United States has perfect capability of beating any country in the world into a pulp, but it will come at a cost.
Setting the agenda for tomorrow's discussions.
Conflict, it's all created by human beings, so it can all be solved by human beings, if only we can learn to cooperate.
International filmmakers and world-class journalists bring programs to inform and inspire you on Al Jazeera.
It's 13 GMT. This is Al Jazeera live from Doha. You're watching our extensive coverage of the war between the US, Israel and Iran. I'm Marlene Saeed. The US bombs the main hub for Iran's oil industry, hitting what Donald Trump said was every military site on Kark Island. A drone interception in the UAE sparks a fire at crucial oil facility. Iran says American sites anywhere are now legitimate targets. The U.S. Embassy compound in Baghdad is targeted by a missile strike. An American site near the airport is also struck. And Israel continues to strike Lebanon, targeting the capital Beirut and the south of the country. More than 800,000 people have been displaced. Hello and welcome. The war between the US, Israel and Iran is entering its third week. All sides have promised to keep the fight going. More than 2,000 people have been killed so far. The United States has struck Kark Island in the Gulf. It's Iran's main hub for exporting oil. It's located off Iran's southwest coast. Nearly 500 kilometers from the Strait of Hormuz, it's known as the crown jewel or the beating heart of Iran's oil industry. It handles around 90% of all crude exports. At the moment, oil transfers and exports using tankers are still happening. Meanwhile, there's been a fire at the Fujairah port in the United Arab Emirates. UAE officials say it began after debris from an intercepted drone fell on the facility. Fujairah is an important oil transfer hub. It sits on the Gulf of Oman and bypasses the critical Strait of Hormuz, which has effectively been closed by Iran for some time now. Meanwhile, Israel is continuing its attacks across Lebanon. There have been strikes in the capital Beirut and the southern suburb of Dahya, which is a Hezbollah stronghold, and it's being hit particularly hard. Okay, we have correspondents following all the latest developments from Tehran, Baghdad, Doha and Washington, D.C., where our White House correspondent Kimberly Holkett is standing by for us. So, Kimberly, according to the Iranians, exports of oil from Kark Island are still continuing despite those U.S. strikes. Have we heard anything new from the Trump administration regarding that strike? And also what it intends to do about the situation in the Strait of Hormuz?
Yeah, the U.S. president has posted on his social media platform, Truth Social, that the military sites on Kark Island were obliterated, in the words of the president, and that has been confirmed by the Pentagon. What we know is 90 military strikes occurred, or rather, the strikes targeted 90 different sites, mostly missile as well as naval mine facilities. These, according to the Trump administration, have been linked to ship attacks in the Strait of Hormuz. Now, the U.S. president says that he has spared what he calls, for now, Iran's oil infrastructure, but he said that he is potentially would reconsider his decision if Iran intends to target the shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. So to that end, the Trump administration has been putting in place, although it hasn't been officially announced, a plan to mitigate any attacks on shipping in the Strait of Hormuz, which it maintains remains open. And not only are they considering naval escort ships, but also offering insurance of up to $20 billion for those ships that do make the journey.
Let's turn now to Tawhid Asadi, who is live for us in Tehran. Tawhid, how is Iran reacting to the attack on what is a key part of its oil infrastructure and the news that the U.S. amphibious teams and Marines are also heading to the region?
Well, actually, the gist of the matter when it comes to the reaction from Iran is the readiness for any scenario down the road. But speaking of this very specific attack that happened in the past 24 hours, we know that geostrategically speaking, we are dealing with one of the most significant, if not the most significant, choke points when it comes to the oil exports of the country. The Khark Island plays a very significant critical role. And on that, we've got the statement coming from military parts of the country, all coming out to say, to warn that in case of attack on the oil infrastructures of the country, the retaliation is going to be severe, targeting the oil infrastructures, oil companies belonging or affiliated with the United States in the region. That is one part of the story. And the other part is also indicating escalated situation, as we heard from different officials, militarily speaking, of the country, coming out all to say that the escalation right now is name of the game. IRGC Navy commander talked about 3 U.S. bases across the region being targeted. IRGC itself came out with a statement talking about the 49th wave of their retaliatory strikes. Also, Defense Ministry's spokesperson came out to say that Iran is going to use even more serious weaponry, more with greater destructive power and greater precision in the next round of retaliatory strikes. And of course, it was the first vice president of the country who also said that retaliation is going to be continued as long as the country can make sure that security of it is maintained. It's still, we know that while we're talking about these exchange of furious rhetoric between the two sides, 3 sides, I may say, this is the human casualty. This is the death toll that is creating a huge amount of concern for those who are following the news in that regard. And on that, I have to say that more than 1,400 people have been said to be killed as a result of these strikes, with a very huge number, thousands of residential units, including hospitals, including houses and apartments, including the schools, have been also impacted, some of them massively demolished, others being partly destroyed. And this is part of the actually story, and an important part of the story that we have to keep in mind while the war goes on and we see no sign of de-escalation at the time being.
Back to you, Kimberly. We know that just 2 weeks of this war is already starting to impact prices around the world, particularly when it comes to prices at the gas stations back home in the U.S. What has the reaction been to the cost of this war?
Not happy. Ordinary Americans are already feeling this, and the impacts are expected to escalate, given the fact that right now the cost of filling up a gas tank in the United States has increased by 50 cents a gallon. So those using the measurements of the United States, saying that this is really adding as much as $30, $40, $50 when they go each time. And that has a direct impact on people's ability to buy food, get to work. But it also translates to transportation costs in terms of goods and services, and those prices are spiking as well. So there are huge ramifications for affordability in the United States. But there's also alarm about the timeline. The U.S. president's latest statement saying that he will be continuing this war, hitting Iran hard over the next week. and that this will go on as long as necessary until there's practically nothing left to target. But when pinned down on that timeline, there seems to be concern that the U.S. president will make the decision and not consult with military strategy, saying he'll know when it's over when he feels it in his bones.
Okay, thank you for that. Kimberly Halkett, the reporting there from Washington. Now, the Iranian military has said that it considers shipping ports in the UAE to be legitimate military targets. Have a listen.
Due to the destruction of its military bases in the region, the aggressive U.S. military has taken refuge near ports and docks and in hideouts within cities of the United Arab Emirates, and has launched its missiles towards the Iranian island of Abu Musa and parts of Karg Island. We hereby inform the leaders of the UAE that the Islamic Republic of Iran considers it its legitimate right, in defense of its national sovereignty and territory, to strike and target origins of the enemy's missile launches, including shipping ports, docks, and U.S. military hideouts sheltered within some cities of the UAE. We call on the Muslim people of the United Arab Emirates and population centers to evacuate ports, docks, and locations used by American forces in UAE cities so that they are not harmed.
Well, shortly after that message from the Iranian military, smoke was seen rising from the Fujairah port in the United Arab Emirates. UAE officials say that a fire started after debris fell from an intercepted drone. Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps, as we've been reporting, has warned that UAE ports, docks and military sites are all legitimate targets due to that attack on Karg Island. Let's bring in our reporter, Inzamam Rashid, who is overlooking the Strait of Hormuz in Dibba in the UAE. So if you could tell us what you understand the situation is in Fujairah right now and why this port is so significant.
Well, Marlene, look, it was around 4 o'clock local time this morning where we heard a loud blast here in Dibba, which is on the very entrance of the Strait of Hormuz, because Fujairah port is a few kilometers down to my left-hand side. And there around 4 o'clock this morning, it's believed that an Iranian drone had struck the Fujairah industrial zone and within it, the oil facility that is there. And then a few hours later, around 7:30, 7:45 local time, there was yet another drone strike at that same depot. And right now there are 2 fuel tankers, oil tankers that are alight and still billowing smoke up high into the sky at that Fujairah oil depot. Those 2 oil tankers have been tried to be tackled by emergency services since 4 o'clock this morning, but still we are seeing huge amounts of smoke coming out of that area. And as you mentioned, this is a very incredibly important and strategic oil facility in Fujairah because it's used predominantly to bypass the Strait of Hormuz. And as we know, over the last couple of weeks, this waterway behind me, where there are still around 1,000 ships waiting to pass through the Strait of Hormuz, has been shut by the Iranian military. So a lot of the pressure has been on that port in Fujairah to export oil for the UAE. Now, it's my understanding that oil operations at the facility have suspended, and they could be suspended for a good few days whilst they still try and tackle the blaze from those 2 Iranian drones that targeted that facility. We also know that particularly this area has been targeted before, and specifically that site. So this isn't a new target for the Iranian military. They know the importance of that oil site. And so after what happened overnight within the Iranian territories, they have decided once again to target this facility. I think it just gives you a real sense of how angry Iran have been after that attack by the US, and particularly now where they want to focus their military aggression, Marlene.
And you mentioned that this is the second time the port has been targeted like this. What have officials in the UAE been saying to this latest development?
Well, they've been responding in retaliation to what the IRGC had said directly to the UAE and, in fact, to the residents of the UAE. We know that they had a stark message directly for the people of the Emirates, where they said that interests in the UAE, including ports, docks, and military locations, are now legitimate targets after US forces attacked Iranian islands. They also said and urged residents in the UAE to evacuate ports, docks, and US military shelters to avoid civilian casualties. But we know that this has been a tactic of Iran over the last couple of weeks. They have already targeted ports. We saw an attack on a refinery in Abu Dhabi, the Ruwais refinery, the largest oil refinery in the UAE. We saw attacks on Jebel Ali port in Dubai as well. And then, of course, the airports in Abu Dhabi and Dubai have been attacked on multiple occasions. So it's not like Iran hasn't been targeting these areas already, as well as, of course, US military assets across the Gulf. In retaliation to what Iran has said and done here in Fujairah today, the UAE's president's diplomatic advisor, Anwar Gargash, has said the Iranian strategy, which reflects its inability to confront American and Israeli strikes by targeting Arab Gulf states, reveals a military impotence and moral bankruptcy and a political isolation. It's my understanding that this afternoon the UAE is furious by this statement from the IRGC. They've in fact called it psychological warfare, and they are adamant that this is a reckless and unlawful manner carried out by Iran today in Fujairah, but also this message that they've now delivered to the UAE. It looks as if Iran will continue such strikes in the hours and the days ahead, Malin.
Thank you so much for that. Inzamam Rashid reporting there from Dibba in the UAE. Let's discuss all the latest developments with our guest, Roxanne Farman-Famian. She's a Middle East and Gulf Affairs security specialist and a professor of Middle East politics at the University of Cambridge. She joins us live from Venice in Italy. Thank you for your time. So is the United States going for Iran's economic jugular with this attack on Khark Island?
Well, it's hard to know because so far they've only hit military targets on Khark, and those are very minor. And so obviously it's going to be easy for the United